Hello, and welcome to the Amongst Romans podcast, your window to everything Italy from an outsider's perspective. Join us each week as we navigate the Italian way of life and all the adventures that come along with it. I can't believe it's been this long and we haven't really talked about our favorite city, and that's Rome.
Yeah, I think it's long overdue.
I think Rome is one of those cities that everybody coming to Italy is likely to visit, right? Because you're probably going to fly into Rome from wherever you're coming and then start your journey from here. What do you think is the biggest mistake people make when they come to Rome, especially for the first time?
I think they end up packing too much into such a short period of time. Everyone wants to see as many sites as they can, but I think for the amount of time most spend in Rome, I really don't think it's enough.
I agree, and I totally understand the dilemma, right? Because you're coming to Rome for the first time and you're not sure if you're going to come back or how soon you're going to come back. So I can understand why someone would want to see as many things as they can. I mean, we did the same thing, right? The first time we came, because we were just so excited to come and see all those things. But at the same time, like you said, I think people underestimate how much time it takes to see everything, how far things are. Rome is a big city. If you try to get from place to place with public transit, it can still take a while, whether you take the subway, you take the bus. It's a big city, especially if there's traffic, if there's rain or something that's causing more delay. You're not going to find, going from one place to place really fast. So I think if you're planning to come to Rome for like a day or two, you really are not going to experience a lot of it. And I think you might actually end up not liking it. It's something that I think people try to come in, pack as many things as they can into their schedule, then they end up running from place to place. And then they're like, I hated Rome. It was so busy, it was crowded, and I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did on our first trip, essentially, right? We did stay a few days, but I think we packed in way too much on that first trip. I barely remember it because we tried to visit so many of the sites in such a short period of time that I don't think we enjoyed it as much as we should have. So yeah, I think whoever comes to visit Rome, I think they should spend some time and actually, put together an itinerary plan, but just don't overdo it.
Yeah, I think that's the key to it. I think minimum, I would say 3 days. That's like the bare minimum to even just see things. So if you're coming to Rome for the first time and you don't have a lot of time to spend here, don't worry. We'll try to help you figure out the most efficient way to see the things you want to see and make the most out of your time so that you can actually enjoy your trip. But before we even get to that, I wanted to talk about why Rome is such a great place to visit. And I think everybody should come and visit at least once. So why is Rome your favorite city? Let's start with that one.
Well, my thoughts on Rome, right? It's always going to be food first, but it's outside of the usual culinary enjoyment. It's the sights, right? The Colosseum, all the churches, the Vatican. Those are probably the top of my list.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely the ruins. Rome is like a layer cake of history. And for someone like me who studied history and just loves everything that's old and ancient, that's like a playground. Forget Disneyland. Rome is my Disneyland. I love coming here and just seeing everything from the ancient sites, which are like incredible. But there's also other parts of Rome that are just enjoyable. There are so many parts of Rome that you really need to just sit back and enjoy. And once you do that, you really are able to see Rome for what it is. It's an amazing city.
100% agree. There's centuries of history there, right? Everywhere you turn, there's something to see. Of course, people go just to see the usual, like I said, the Colosseum, the Vatican, but there's so much more. I think it's really difficult to pack that into such a short amount of time. And like I said, we recommend spending at least a few days and planning that itinerary, right? And expect huge lineups, especially if you go during the high season. You'll be in a lineup probably half of the time. especially if you're visiting the Colosseum. There's a line going around the Colosseum itself almost, right? So, be ready for that.
Yeah, I think it's also important to mention that Rome gets really hot in the summer, especially in August. So if you go into like the Colosseum, it's going to be hot. If you're standing in line to get into the Colosseum, it's going to be hot. So you're basically burning in the sun. Then you're walking around the Forum, the Colosseum, again, open air. You are going to burn. You go to the Vatican and there are like tons of other people. And guess what? There's no air conditioning. So there are certain positives about visiting Rome off season, especially not in August when it's the hottest time of the year. But we'll get into that a little bit further down. But tell me, Alex, do you know why Rome is called the Eternal City?
No. Why is it called that?
Well, there's a couple of different thoughts on that, but it goes back to the actual ancient Romans. They felt that their empire was so vast and it was so impressive, and they believed that it would endure forever. So they had various phrases in Latin, which kind of translates loosely to like eternal city and empire without end. And I think it was Virgil and Tibullus, the Roman poets, who used that, and it sort of stuck. Now, you can also look at Rome, and despite being around for like 2,000 plus years, Rome continues to be a significant center of power. Here is the seat of the Catholic Church. It's always had a prominence in history. So again, on top of that ancient belief, you have the enduring legacy and, of course, the historical significance, right? Like there's so many things that happen here, from Roman Empire to then the rise of Christianity and then the rules of popes. Rome has been sacked. Rome has been burned. Rome has been flooded. There's a lot of different things that have happened here. And I think the ancient Romans might be really surprised at how much we still have from that time. So when they say, city that endures, I think that would be right.
Let's talk about, what are our top tips for your Roman adventure? We discussed the best time to visit, and it really depends on personal preference, right? If you like or enjoy the heat, like I do, visiting during the summer is fine. Just like I said, you need to dress appropriately. Wear a hat, shorts, short sleeve shirt. Keep in mind, in the Vatican, you do need to dress appropriately for that. They don't allow cut off tank tops and stuff like that. So you need to keep that in mind if you're going to visit the Vatican.
I think there's no such thing as off-season anymore. I think I've been to Rome almost every month of the year. I've never seen it without crowds. So if you're looking at when should I come, again, summer is popular, but I would say summer is probably the worst time to come to Rome because, again, it's so hot, like we mentioned. But it's also filled with tourists. A lot of Romans leave the city in August because Italians have August is their beach time. So you have a lot of the locals leave, and the city is just basically filled with tourists. So everybody's trying to get from place to place. You have more lineups, you have more crowds. And like we said, it's really hot. Like we've been to Rome in August and it's very hot. So I would say come like March, April. It's really nice. January could be nice too. If you don't like, if you want a bit more of a warmer weather, March is good. I was there just now, it's spring. So you'd get some of the flowering trees and just like the blooms coming out. Rome has a lot of gardens that you can go check out. So again, I think spring is a good time because again, it's not as hot. It's a bit warmer and, the weather is perfect to walk around.
Yeah, I think those times are perfect for people that want to enjoy mild weather and avoid the extreme heat of the summertime. But, we spoke about this before. It's become extremely busy lately. Even off season, like you said, you see a ton of people. And of course, depending what part of Rome, say in Trastevere, you'll find a lot of, students, especially in the evening, you'll see crowds and packed crowds around the restaurants and bars, especially on the weekends. So keep that in mind. If you want to eat really well in Trastevere, which is basically the culinary hotspot in Rome, you definitely want to look up the restaurants you're interested in and booking fairly well ahead of time, so you'll be able to get a seat at a decent hour.
When we were there and we were walking, remember it was so busy you could barely get through. It was like being in a club. I don't even think that was summer. I think that might have been May or even fall. And it was so busy. So again, Trastevere is great, but it gets really busy. So when you're thinking of, oh, I'm going to go here and I'm going to pop over there, it's quite far from place to place. So if you're planning on walking, we do a lot of walking in Rome. Walking is great, but it takes a while, right? So it's going to take you a while to get from where you are to where you want to see. And that doesn't really matter where you are in Rome because I bet if you are wanting to see something, it's going to be, quite far off. So for a first timer, I would say try staying maybe a bit more in the center, a bit closer to the attractions. There's also different places you can look. We've stayed close to the Pantheon. We've stayed in other areas, but we've also stayed further in a different areas that are less touristy, and they're also great. So again, it just depends on maybe staying closer to the center might be easier for the first time because you're closer to the attractions, but also expect those prices to be higher and there'll be more people there, right? You can get from a place to place by subway. There are cabs. I've actually never taken a cab in Rome, but you can take subway. There's streetcars. There's, those scooters that you can hop on or bikes. And those are pretty good for getting around. And as we said, walking, right? It's easy to underestimate how far places are. And that's going to eat up a lot of your time to try to get from a place to place.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think the biggest difference in the last few years is actually the access to alternative transport. Like you can actually rent out or use your app, Uber app or Lime or whatever they call it now, is the scooters. The e-bikes and scooters actually are really convenient, and they're located all over the city. You can use your app to look one up, and most of the times there's a scooter nearby, and you just jump on it, take a quick 15-minute ride, 20-minute ride, and get to wherever you need to get if you want to avoid walking too much, right? But yeah, I expect a lot of walking, wear some really comfortable shoes. And, even if you plan on being there for a little while, maybe see if you can rent a scooter or an e-bike and even, see if you can get a hold of a helmet. Because, yeah, it can be a little dangerous if you're not used to the Roman way of driving.
I think that's a good point to make because let's say if you're coming to Rome for the first time and you think, oh yeah, I'm just going to rent a scooter and I'm going to, zip around like the Colosseum and it'll be great. The traffic there is a bit crazy. So if you've never been to Rome and this is your first time, I would say probably pass on that idea unless it's like a guided tour and someone else is doing the driving because you will not enjoy it. I think it's also important to mention that you have to budget for food and transportation. So whether you decide to take a scooter or the bus or Uber or whatever. So, that can get quite expensive if you're going from like a far place. You have to budget for entrance fees. There are some places that are free, but a lot of the attractions, especially the major attractions, you have to pay a fee to get in. So if you're going to want to see the Colosseum, you might want to book your tickets ahead of time because I don't even think they sell tickets. Like if you walk up and try to buy tickets, and you want to factor that in when you're coming. Rome is still, I think, fairly affordable. Hotels, Airbnbs, comparing to other cities. I think, let's say, compared to Milan, it's way cheaper. Like Milan is ridiculous. But, you still will find places in Rome that if you are staying closer to like the major attractions, you're going to expect to pay more. So you have to factor that in. If you don't mind staying a bit further away and taking the subway, that's also a good consideration. All right. So now if you're thinking of coming to Rome and you want to see all the attractions, I mean, who can blame you, right? We've been there. We've seen it. I think the best way to get the most out of your time here without going crazy is to take an organized tour or two. So again, you're looking at things like Colosseum, you're looking at the Roman Forum, you want to go see the Vatican. All those places is where everybody else wants to go, right? If you just walk up and try to get a ticket the day off, you're probably not going to be able to. You can book your ticket ahead of time and then show up and just go in. But again, you're going to be surrounded by a crowd of people and you might not enjoy it. What I think is great about Rome, and the attraction is that there's so many different tour companies and there's so many different tours that you can take that go beyond that. Here is the Colosseum, let's walk around. There are some tours when you can go see the Colosseum at night, which again is pretty cool because how often do you see that, right? Like Colosseum at night is incredible. And instead of going and seeing the Colosseum like everybody else, go and see it at night. It's a bit of a different perspective of looking at it, right? Take a private tour of the Vatican. So you show up first thing in the morning and you have the place to yourself. So you don't have to feel like a sardine in a can and try to get to see as many things as you can. Try to think of seeing the places that everybody else sees, but in a way that you take the most out of it. So again, look at the different tours that offer you a different way of looking at something.
Yeah, my recommendation is definitely find a tour operator, right? And you know what? You definitely would benefit, or anyone visiting would benefit from a tour guide.
We're going to link some really good tours that we recommend in the show notes, so make sure you check them out. But let's say if you're not into the tour groups and you don't want to do that, I always like to do the hop on, hop off buses. You can get 3 to 5 day pass. So why they're great? I think they're awesome because A, the bus takes you around to all the major key places that you'd want to see anyway. You get to see them from a different angle, and you also get to see where they are. So if you want to go back to that area, you can be like, okay, great. Because you know what? You might just like to see the Colosseum as you drive by it. You might not want to go inside, and that's fine. The bus is also great because you can use them instead of transit, right? So you can hop on and off different places. And if you have the pass for, let's say, 3 days, you can just use that instead of paying for public transit. Sometimes you have either a person talking, giving you overview of where you're going and where you're seeing. And sometimes there is a pre-recorded information, which is also great because at least you know, oh, this is what this is and this is what this is. So you're not just blindly guessing where you are. And I think those are really good if you want to see a lot in that short amount of time. Because again, the bus will take you around all the major sites. You can get off the bus and then see the place. You can back on and go to the next one. So I think those are pretty good. I like doing the hop on and hop off buses.
Yeah, that's an affordable way to get around also, right? So you can get from one spot to another using that the hop on, hop off option. I think we should also mention that, many of the attractions, a lot of the museums actually offer the services where, there's a guided tour. So you can probably take advantage of that if you're interested.
Another thing that you can do is get the Rome City Pass. The pass gives you free admission or discounted entrance to many of the attractions in Rome. There's free unlimited access to the public transit as well. Then you get to pick which museums you want to see or which, attractions you want to see. There's so many of them. So you don't have to worry too much about booking ahead of time. You could just get the pass and show up and that will get you in. So again, like we said, you can do organized tours, which will take you from a place to place sometimes, depends on what the tour is and where you're going. The hop on, hop off buses, which are also great. And the Rome City Pass, which is a bit more, I think that's a bit more freedom for you to do and pick and choose what you want to do and when you want to do it.
Let's talk about our favorite places to visit in Rome. My personal favorite on the top of the list is obviously going to be the Colosseum. So I love that place. It's definitely a must-see. It was built around 80 AD. It's a massive amphitheater used for gladiator contests back in the day, right? Everybody knows Gladiator, right? It's just something you have to see when you go to Rome, right? Everybody knows that it was used for gladiator contests back in those days. Then there was also the bad side of things, public executions, animal hunting and such, right? But it's definitely something you want to see and put on the top of your list, right? Just be prepared that it will take a little while to get in. There's lineups that, circle the Colosseum most times, especially during high season. But it's just something awe-inspiring when you walk in and you see that open area where they used to fight back in those days. It's just, it's really impressive.
And I think it's also great when you go see the Colosseum, whether you're outside or inside or whatever. And then you go and there's many places when you can find like a 3D reconstruction of what it used to look like in its glory. And it's just incredible when you sit there and you're like, wow, it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just me because I just love the history so much. But it's really incredible to see, what it looked like. I just imagine like how massive it must have been to people in those days, right? So this gleaming white marble, and we go in, the Romans were a bloodthirsty bunch. So whether you're going in and watching people fight to death or kill each other or, fight the animals, like, ugh, that's the part I'm not too keen on. But the actual architecture of the building, that's incredible. I agree with you. That's a big one. I think that's probably the number one thing people want to see when they come to Rome. And again, you will love the Colosseum if you see it the right way. So do yourself a favor, either book a tour or get your tickets ahead of time, and do not come in August. You will enjoy it much more. Now let's talk about the second big thing that I love, and it's right beside the Colosseum, the Roman Forum. Think of Roman Forum as sort of like the center of ancient Rome. It's like a big square when they used to have important buildings, government offices. This was where they had stores. It was really like I don't know, say a mall, but it was sort of like a big important place. And when you walk through, it's huge. It's an incredible place. You can only just imagine how amazing, again, it would have looked. And they have reconstructions, like I said, of the Colosseum, of the Roman Forum. And it's just incredible. Like you can walk around it and you feel that you're walking in the footsteps of the Romans that were there before you. And, people like Julius Caesar, Augustus, they all walked around there, and you just can't beat that feeling anywhere else. You can see the Forum from outside, the street that goes around it, but really walking on like the floor of the Forum, I think is just an incredible experience that you can't really get unless you are on the floor there. It's kind of hard to explain, you know what I mean? Like it's really incredible.
Yeah, I enjoyed visiting that myself, and then we do have to mention the notable structures there, right? The Temple of Vesta, which is dedicated to the Roman goddess of hearth. And then the Arch of Septimius Severus, which shows a triumphal arch commemorating the victories in the East and such.
Yeah, those are quite incredible. And there is a facade of what I guess became church. This was a temple built by some guy. He was a wealthy man, and he built it. And he wrote, "This is a temple to me and my wife. This is the temple dedicated to us gods." And then the Catholic Church comes and says, "No, this is a temple to our God now," which I learned about that in school. And I was so happy when we actually went to see it. I remember I was pointing it out to you like, that's it. That's the one. That's the one. Now, another place that I think should be on everybody's list, which may and may not be, is the Pantheon. Pantheon is just simply incredible. When you go in and you are standing outside of it, I mean, it's big and looks kind of, nice. The magic is when you go inside. Now they charge to get inside. Before it used to be free. I think now it's about €5 to walk inside. And honestly, it's totally worth it. The Pantheon is the most intact building from the ancient time. Think about it. This is the most intact building from like 2,000 years ago. You walk in and it's not what I expected at first, because remember, it was turned into a church, right? You have a lot of religious ornamentation around it. But you look up and there is that marvelous dome and you see the ceiling and there is that hole in the top, which is called the oculus. And you think, wow, that's actually pretty cool. And when you think about the architecture and how influential that dome was and still is, it's really incredible where you could stand there and you're seeing it like in person, this incredible structure that was built by the Romans so many years ago that they still don't know how they actually end up building it, right? Like the structure is unsupported and it's got that oculus that when it rains, it never really goes around. It just goes sort of down. Anyway, you have to go and see it because it's really incredible. I love the Pantheon. I try to go by at least once when I'm in Rome. But that doesn't always work out. I would say the Pantheon, if you're debating should you see it or not, I would say definitely go and see it.
Yeah, I think the Pantheon is actually a very underrated place to visit, right? It may not be on everyone's list or top of their list, but I think it's something you have to see. It's just awe-inspiring, especially when you walk in and see that dome. And that structure, the way it was made, it's been mimicked all over the world, right? I think even the Capitol building in DC was actually built in a similar fashion.
Yeah, it's been copied all over, including the Washington, D.C. But there's a Pantheon in Paris, which we also saw. Actually, the cathedral in Florence was also inspired by the Pantheon. So again, lots of history there. Now let's move on to another place that I think most people might venture to. It's the Trevi Fountain. It's beautiful. I have a bit of love and hate relationship with the Trevi Fountain because the fountain itself is beautiful, but I have never seen the fountain with like no people.
Yeah, it's actually pretty funny. Every time we visited, it was just jam packed. It's nothing like you see on TV. I think most of the times that they film it, they cordon it off and clear the people out, right? But it's so jam packed that it's extremely difficult to actually just get a good view because it's so many people, so many visitors, tourists. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. But it's definitely a stop you want to take in Rome to see the Trevi Fountain.
I remember there's always a tradition that if you toss a coin into the Trevi Fountain, it will ensure your return to Rome. I think actually the least busy I've seen the Trevi Fountain was in March 2020, right before the COVID shut down all the world. I was there and I think that was the least amount of people I've seen around the fountain. You can actually see spots without people. But other than that, unless you go like super early in the morning, expect to see crowds and it's very busy. So also watch your pockets because I think pickpocketing would be, that's what it would happen.
Yeah, I think we came across on a couple occasions. Actually, recently I saw someone actually run to a police officer in the area that they got pickpocketed. Right, so yeah, definitely be careful. Keep an eye on your personal stuff, especially your wallet, and don't let your guard down.
Now let's talk about another place that it's probably on top of most people's list of places to see in Rome, and that's the Vatican City and St. Peter's Basilica.
I thought it was very interesting. I don't think it was worth that long wait, but it's definitely something you want to see at least once in your life, right? The frescoes are amazing. You get to look at the frescoes in the ceilings, and it's pretty awe-inspiring, right? But it's really crowded, and you'll find it extremely hot there. And then, of course, you have that issue with the dress code, right? If your shorts are a certain length above your knees, if you're wearing a tank top, you got to make sure you cover up. Just keep that in mind. But it's definitely a stop that you need to take on your first, or if it's the only time going to Rome, you definitely need to see the Vatican.
I'm going to be a bit controversial here and say, I think you can skip it. I mean, we've been to the St. Peter's Basilica and we did the Vatican thing, and I don't think I would go back unless I did certain tours that would take you sort of under the Vatican. There's some places which are not necessarily accessible to tourists unless you're with a guide. But the church itself, again, I think if you're a religious person and you're there for that experience, you might feel differently about this than I do. I just remember these gold skeletons and these black columns. Everything was very dramatic, very sort of over the top and freaky. I didn't enjoy it that much. And then when you think, okay, they took the marble from the Colosseum and the Pantheon and they brought it here, it almost feels like, my God, they ruined those beautiful ancient buildings to build this, right? And like I said, you might feel differently about it. That's how I feel about it. We don't really go in that area that much, really, when we are in Rome. It's not an area that is like a top for me. I think everybody goes to the Vatican and the Basilica. I personally think that if you don't go, it's fine. I don't I don't necessarily think that you have to go unless you really want to, because again, the crowds are massive. It's hot in there, and there are so many other beautiful churches if you're looking for that religious experience around the city that are equally stunning. They have their works by masters and other, important figures that I don't think you really need to be in the Vatican. But again, that's just my personal opinion.
It can be a little creepy, but there's some people that might actually be interested in seeing those type of things, right? And of course, if you're religious, it's one of those stops you have to take.
Okay, another great place I think most people should go on their trip to Rome, the first one for sure, it's Piazza Navona. Piazza Navona is this long square that has three different fountains. In the middle, there's this big, massive one, and then you have kind of two smaller ones on both ends. I really like Piazza Navona. It's one of my favorite places in Rome. And there's two things about it that stick out. One, it's the elongated shape. And you might think, why is this piazza shaped like that? It's not a square. Well, that's because it's built over the ancient Roman stadium. And they used to have chariot races, right? So when you're standing there, you're like, okay, I get it now. They used to go around. But the fun fact was they used to flood it back like maybe in the 15th century. The reason that there are fountains there is because the popes were trying to, make themselves more appealing to the public, I guess. So they would fund these building projects, and many of them included fountains, which brought water to the people in Rome. And I forget which pope it was, but he had this residence there, and they used to flood that whole area, and they used to have boats on there and stuff for entertainment, which was quite interesting. I tried to find like a picture or painting of it. I couldn't find it, but I think that's pretty incredible when you think about it. And the fountains themselves are obviously beautiful.
It's definitely an interesting stop to see Piazza Navona. I enjoyed it, and it may not actually be one of those locations top of everyone's list, but I think it's highly recommended.
The Spanish Steps are probably another spot on everybody's list that's coming to Rome for the first time. And it's actually a very nice square with a fountain and obviously the Spanish Steps. Just make sure you don't sit on the stairs because you'll probably be chased away by the police. You were able to do that in the past, but you are no longer able to sit there. So just be careful of that. And again, watch out for pickpocketers. Now that we've covered the places we think everybody coming to Rome for the first time is likely to see, we'll bring you another episode on the other places we think are worth exploring, whether you're coming to Rome for the second time or if you want to extend your trip for longer than a few days. Now, we haven't really talked about food, Alex, your favorite thing. So maybe you can tell people about the food that's popular in Rome they should try when they come on their visit.
I think we should start with, the top pasta dishes that everyone loves when they visit Rome. We'll start with the carbonara. It's a pasta dish that's made with spaghetti usually, and it's mixed in with egg yolks and a lot of pecorino cheese. It has to be pecorino cheese, not the regular Parmesan you buy at the store. The pecorino cheese is a little more sharp and saltier. It goes beautifully with the dish. And I think the star of the dish is going to be the pork cheeks, which is guanciale. We essentially chop up the guanciale, fry it up till it gets nice and crispy. They'll take it out, and I guess with the fat from the pork, what they do is they will toss the pasta in with the egg yolk. They take it off the fire, obviously, because you don't want scrambled eggs. Then they mix in the pecorino cheese. Usually what they do is they'll mix it with the egg yolks and then toss it with the pasta, and it's amazing. Like it's something you have to try when you visit Rome. And Rome is the place to have it. That's where that dish was born, and it's definitely number one on the list.
And what would be your second pick?
And second one on the list for my favorite dishes to have in Rome is cacio e pepe. And most times it's a, they use a rigatoni pasta. Sometimes they'll have spaghetti, but it's essentially pecorino cheese once again, and lots of black pepper ground in. So they toss it together and it gives you that nice creamy texture, and it's just out of this world. It's definitely another dish that you have to try. So if you're there for 2-3 days, make sure you try the carbonara first, then the cacio e pepe, and you'll be in heaven.
I must say that I've never had the carbonara because I don't eat meat. And I'm not a huge fan of pepper, so that's not my favorite dish. But I hear it's amazing. So yeah, I agree with you. If you are there and you want to try a traditional Roman dish, those two dishes you have to try. What I do like about the dishes in Rome is the artichokes. I'm not a huge fan of artichokes, but there's two ways of doing it. One is alla romana, which is more of, I would compare it to almost like a pickled or some sort of marinated artichoke that you then just eat on its own. I tried the Jewish style. It's fried. So you have this artichoke flour that's deep fried and it comes with a bit of salt on it. And that was quite good. Artichokes are popular like in the spring. March is a good time to go. I'm not sure if it extends maybe like March, early April, you can still get it. And they make also pasta with artichokes, don't they?
Yeah, you can find pasta-based dishes made with artichokes. What they'll do is they'll kind of do it what they do with eggplant. They'll fry it up and toss it with olive oil, salt, pepper with the pasta, and it's out of this world also.
Now, are artichokes more of like a Roman thing? Because we have artichokes here too, but I think the actual dish with artichoke is more Roman, no?
Yeah, I was born in Rome, but yeah, artichoke generally is very popular throughout Italy.
So now, again, there is the pizza. It's a bit of a different pizza than you would get in Naples, what we are familiar with, right? The pizza in Naples is very doughy and very fluffy, whereas in Rome, the dough is a bit more flat, right? It's a bit more crunchy. They call it pizza, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's not round like you find it in most places, and you don't get served the whole pizza. They come in slices or kind of squares, and it's cooked in a pan. It's almost like a focaccia, but pizza, right? So it's actually really good. Pizza alla romana is really something you have to try also.
Yeah, and you can also order it by a slice, right? It's not a slice what we think of in North America. It's more like a square. So you buy a bigger or smaller, they weigh it for you, and then you could just take it to go, sort of like a lunch, or I was going to say like a sandwich, but obviously it's not. So you can just get like a little bite of a pizza and take it to go, which is also quite good.
Yeah, it's great when you're in a hurry or you're doing a lot of touristy things and walking around. You'll find a lot of small bars that have that on the storefront and on display, and just grab a slice or a square and take it to go in and just eat as you walk.
Now, Rome is also great for, obviously, gelato is great. I don't mind the coffee shops. I had coffee, like a cappuccino and a cornetto, many places. I don't find Rome that expensive. Obviously, if you're having a coffee outside of the train station or in big tourist areas, you'll pay more. But I actually find Rome to be very affordable for food.
Yeah, it's not that expensive if you avoid the usual tourist traps near the bigger touristy attractions. You'll find some great deals, and you can eat really, really on the cheap. And there's plenty of places where you can just get Italian street food, fried foods, pastas to go. Like we've seen some small shops where you can just pick and choose the type of pasta you want, the sauce, and they just throw it in like a little cup almost, and you take it to go and just eat it.
Yeah, they didn't have that the first time when we came. Remember, we were starving for like hours because everything was closed. But I guess another tip for you to remember is that the water in Rome, you can drink water for free. Every fountain that you see in Rome, the water is drinkable. The water comes from the aqueduct. It's constantly running, so it's never still. When it's hot and you have a reusable water bottle, you can just refill it anywhere at any fountain. So you keep hydrated and you can drink it for free. Now, if you're coming to Rome or Italy for the first time, it's also important to mention that they will not give you a glass of water. Like I know in Canada, I think in the States too, you can just go and say, can I have a glass of water with whatever you order? They don't do glass of water here in Italy. So you have to either order a bottle of water or you just don't have water. You just get your own, I guess.
Yeah, so I hope you enjoy your experience in Rome and keep an eye out for our second episode.
Don't forget to check out the show notes for more information and helpful links. We'll see you next time.
Ciao.
And this brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review on whatever you're listening right now. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned.